The dark between the stars was no longer empty. It was full of the Kael'var. They came not as explorers, but as a tide. Their ships were like jagged pieces of a broken moon, moving with a silent, terrible purpose. For decades, their advance had been a slow, inevitable fact of the galaxy. They would appear at the edge of a star system, broadcast their demand, and then act with a speed that left worlds in stunned submission. Supreme Archon Vorel stood on the command platform of the flagship, Worldbreaker. He was tall and thin, his skin a pale gray like cooled ash. His eyes, large and black, reflected the light of 100 screens. Each screen showed a conquered world. A green jungle planet, now silent. A desert world with cities of glass, now dark. A watery moon, its oceans still. All now paid tribute to the Imperium. The process was clean, efficient, and total. Status of the next system. Vorel's voice was a dry rustle. Like leaves on stone. A subordinate, its multi-jointed fingers tapping on a crystalline console, responded. Designation: New Jiangju, a tertiary colony world. Settled by a species self-identified as human. Technology level: pre-cohesive. Defensive capabilities: minimal orbital platforms, limited ground-based artillery. Population: approximately 4 million. Vorel felt the faint, familiar pulse of disdain. Pre-cohesive. It meant their technology was a patchwork. They used physical projectiles and fission power. They had not mastered psychic harmonization or energy manipulation. They were isolated. Another easy victory. Transmit the first pulse, Vorel ordered. From the Worldbreaker, a signal was sent. It was not just a message of words. It was a psychic imprint, a wave of oppressive certainty designed to flood the primitive brain structures of most species. It carried a simple, crushing idea: resistance is not a concept. It is an error. Be corrected. On the surface of New Jiangju, in a government bunker carved into a granite mountain, Governor June felt it. He was a man in his late 40s, his hair streaked with gray not from age but from the stress of keeping a young colony alive. One moment he was reviewing evacuation plans, the next a wave of cold dread washed over him. It whispered that his guns were useless, his people weak, his hope a childish fantasy. He saw his aide, a young woman named Mija, stumble and put a hand to her temple, her face pale. June clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. The pain was sharp, real. It grounded him. He had lived through the famine on the transport ship during the founding voyage. He had helped pull survivors from a collapsed mining shaft. This feeling, this external fear, was just another thing to endure. He shook his head, clearing the fog. "They are here," he said, his voice rough but steady. "Send the general distress call. Every channel, every frequency. Then activate the planetary defense protocol. Scramble the interceptors." Mija, focusing on his voice, nodded shakily and went to work. In orbit, Vorel watched the human response on his screens. A few small, blunt-nosed ships lifted from the planet. They moved with admirable speed, but their weapons were simple missiles. The Kael'var point defense systems, which fired lances of coherent light, sliced them apart before they got close. The psychic pulse had not caused immediate surrender, as it did with the Vex or the Talon, but the resistance was pathetic. Textbook. "Release the swarm," Vorel commanded. From bays along the underside of the Kael'var cruisers, clouds of objects poured forth. These were not independent fighters but drones, biomechanical constructs about the size of a ground car. They moved as one, a shimmering, shifting school of metal and chitin. They did not think. A single command node on the Worldbreaker guided them all with perfect, instantaneous control. They surged toward the remaining orbital platforms. On the surface, June watched the main viewer. One by one, the icons representing his platforms winked out. The swarm was like acid eating through metal. It was over in minutes. The sky, which should have been defended, was now clear for the invaders. "Governor," Mija said, her voice hollow, "orbital defense is gone. They are launching drop pods." June looked at the faces in the bunker. frightened, young, old, all looking to him. He had promised to protect them. He had promised his friend, Captain Sumin, that he would keep the colony safe until her next patrol. That patrol was not due for another 6 weeks. Send the final distress call, June said. He straightened his jacket. Tell them. Tell anyone who is listening that New Jiangju is under attack by an unknown hostile force. We will hold as long as we can. The message was a formality, a gesture. No one was close enough to hear. No one could stop what was coming. High above, Vorel observed the first drop pods streaking like meteors through New Jiangju's atmosphere. The subjugation would be complete within the solar day. He turned away from the screen showing the planet. It was already, in his mind, another green icon on his map. Another victory for the Imperium. The humans, like all the others, had been found predictable and weak that he did not notice the faint, almost invisible ripple in space at the very edge of the star system. A ripple that registered on none of his sensors, tuned as they were for energy signatures and psychic waves. It was the signature of a massive object moving with profound silence. It was the TFN Jiangzhou, and it had just heard the call. The bridge of the TFN Jiangzhou was quiet. It was a different kind of quiet than the emptiness of space. This was the quiet of focus. Soft lights glowed on control panels. The air hummed with the sound of life support and the faint, steady beep of the long-range sensor suite. Captain Sumin sat in her command chair. She was a woman in her 50s, her black hair tied back in a simple, practical style. Her face was calm, but her eyes were always moving, watching the data on the screens around her. She had been on patrol for 3 months, watching over this lonely stretch of space. Her ship was alone, but it was her home. Her crew was her family. Her first officer, Tae-won, was younger. He had a sharp mind and a talent for seeing patterns in data. He was looking at his screen now, his brow slightly furrowed. A signal had just come in. It was very faint, broken by distance. Captain, Tae-won said, I have a fragmented transmission on the emergency colonial band. Source is the New Jiangju system. Sumin felt a small, cold knot form in her stomach. New Jiangju. Her last stop before this long patrol. Her friend June was there. She nodded for him to continue. Tae-won worked to clean up the signal. Words broke through the static. Under attack. Unknown hostile. Orbital defenses gone. Hold as long. Then it cut off. The finality of the silence was worse than the message. Put it on speaker, Sumin said. The broken message played. The voice was June's. She knew the tension in it, the controlled fear. The bridge crew had gone still. Everyone was listening. New Jiangju was a small colony, a peaceful place. They grew engineered rice in hydroponic domes and mined rare minerals. They were not soldiers. Time to the system at maximum cruise. Sumin asked, her voice even. The navigation officer, a woman named Hannah, answered quickly. 18 hours, Captain. 18 hours. In 18 hours, there might be nothing left to save. The Jiangzhou was a dreadnought, powerful, but it was just one ship. They knew nothing about the enemy. How many ships did they have? What weapons? Sumin looked at the star chart. New Jiangju was a single, shining dot. There was no other help close enough. The nearest fleet base was weeks away. It was her or it was no one. Sound battle stations, she said, her voice still calm. But keep us quiet. Go to silent running protocol 1. A soft alarm pulsed through the ship, a gentle but insistent tone. Crew members across the Jiangzhou moved with swift, practiced silence. Hatches sealed. Non-essential systems powered down. The main lights dimmed, leaving the bridge in a soft, red-tinged glow. The Jiangzhou did not rely on the giant energy shields or roaring plasma drives that many alien races used. Human technology had taken a different path. Their greatest advantage was often not being seen. The silent heart drive was a marvel of magnetic containment and inertial control. It moved the massive ship not by a violent push, but by gently bending space around it. It was slow to build speed, but once moving, it created almost no detectable energy signature. To most sensors, the Jiangzhou would look like a small asteroid or nothing at all. Set course for the new Jiangzhou System's Oort cloud. Use it for cover, Sumin ordered. Tae-1, I want every passive sensor we have listening. Don't ping them. Just listen. For hours, the ship sailed in silence. The crew spoke in low voices. They checked and rechecked their systems. In the mess hall, people ate quickly, their faces serious. They all knew what was coming. They had trained for it, but training was different. Sumin did not leave the bridge. She drank bitter tea and watched the data stream. She thought of June. He had given her a jar of honey from the new Jiangzhou apiaries when she left. For your tea on your long watch, he had said. She had not opened it yet. Finally, as they neared the edge of the system, the sensors began to pick up traces. Captain, Tae-1 whispered, as if the enemy could hear him. Multiple contacts in high orbit around New Jiangzhou. 7 large vessels. Signatures are strange. Organic metallic composites. Energy readings are high but patterned. Repetitive. A visual came up on the main screen, enhanced and magnified. The ships were like nothing Sumin had seen. They looked sharp and wrong like thorns. They hung over the blue-green planet like vultures. And the colony? She asked. Tae-1's face tightened. Thermal blooms on the surface. In multiple population centers. Signs of kinetic impacts and some kind of directed energy weapon. He paused. The orbital defense platforms are gone. No debris. They were consumed. Sumin stared at the image of the alien fleet. 7-1. They had already begun their work on the planet. Every minute more people died. The cold knot in her stomach was now a hard ball of ice. The standard tactic would be to call for help and wait. But there was no help. The other option was to attack head-on. That was suicide. 1 ship against 7, even the Jiangzhou, would be destroyed. She stood up from her chair. The bridge crew looked at her. We are not going to charge them, she said, her voice clear in the quiet room. We are going to remind them what it means to be hunted. She turned to her tactical officer, a man named Ji Wu with steady hands. Power up the railgun capacitors. Slowly. Drip feed from the secondary batteries. I want no spike they can see. Arm the Magpie drone bays. Prepare for swarm dispersal pattern ghost. She looked back at the screen, at the planet where her friend was fighting for his life. The aliens thought they had already won. They thought space was empty. They were about to learn that the emptiness was not theirs. It was hers. Bring us in, Captain Sumin said, and keep us in the dark. On the surface of New Jiangzhou, chaos had a specific, terrible pattern. The Kaelvar drop pods had not landed in the fields or the mountains. They had come down directly in the heart of the main settlement, Jiangxiang. Their strategy was not just destruction, but disorientation. To break the spirit first. The drones, the swarm, moved through the streets. They were not like machines. They moved like insects, a smooth, skittering flow of sharp legs and metal shells. Their weapons fired thin beams of greenish light that melted concrete and steel. The colonial militia fired back with their ballistic rifles. The bullets hit, but they often sparked and ricocheted off the hard shells. For every drone that fell, 3 more seemed to take its place. From a makeshift command post in a reinforced warehouse, Governor June tried to direct the defense. His uniform was dusty. The constant, low-grade psychic pressure from the alien ships was like a headache behind his eyes, a whisper telling him to lie down and give up. He ignored it. He focused on the maps, on the reports of where people were trapped. The Western District is being overrun. A young militia woman, Daeun, said, her voice crackling over the radio. We can't hold the line. They're everywhere. Fall back to the secondary position, June ordered, his voice firm. Guide the civilians through the old maintenance tunnels. Go now. He looked at the warehouse roof. He could hear the thud of distant explosions and the high-pitched whine of the alien beams. He thought of Sumin's ship. He had sent the call, but he knew it was a prayer, not a strategy. No ship could get here in time. He picked up his own rifle. It felt heavy and suddenly very primitive. Above, on the Worldbreaker, Archon Vorel was satisfied. The sensor feeds from the ground showed the human resistance crumbling in perfect, predictable ways. Their groups were scattering. Their communications were becoming panicked and confused. The psychic backdrop of fear was doing its work. The harvest of the planet's resources and population would begin within hours. The system remained silent, his sensor officer reported. No energy signatures. No translation wax. The humans have no allies coming. Vorel gave a slow blink of acknowledgement. Just as he thought. This species was isolated, pre-cohesive. They fought with noise and fury, but no true harmony. It was almost boring. He never thought to look for a ship that made no noise. Deep in the outer darkness of the star system, the TFN Jiangzhou was a shadow. It had slipped behind a large, icy comet in the Oort cloud. Captain Sumin watched the main tactical display. It showed the planet and the 7 alien ships in high orbit, connected by glowing lines of data traffic. They were all talking to each other, and one ship, the largest, was talking to all of them. It was the Brain, the Worldbreaker. They're centrally controlled, Tae-1 observed quietly. Look at the command data flow. It's all going to and from the flagship. The drones on the surface, the other ships, they're not thinking for themselves. They're just limbs. Sumin saw it. It was a strength, perfect coordination. But it was also a weakness. A single point of failure. Ji Wu, she said to her tactical officer. Launch the Magpies. Pattern Ghost. Target the command links between the flagship and the swarm on the surface. Not the ships. The data.
Yi Wu nodded.
Launching now. From hidden ports along the Jiangzhou's hull, hundreds of small objects silently drifted out. They were called magpies because they were black, sleek, and drawn to shiny things, in this case data streams and communication lasers. Each was no bigger than a man's hand, equipped with tiny, cold gas thrusters and a simple AI program for one thing: to find, latch onto, and disrupt specific signal types. They spread out like a cloud of dust, invisible to the Kael'var sensors which looked for engines and weapons. They drifted toward the planet, riding the gravitational pull on the ground. Sergeant Ji-hun and his Marines were trapped. They were in the central plaza, pinned down behind the melted ruins of a fountain. A dozen of the skittering drones were closing in from 3 sides. Their green beams sliced the air above his head. Running low on ammo, one of his men, Park, yelled. Ji-hun felt the alien psychic push again. This time it was stronger, a direct assault from a nearby command node. It wasn't just fear. It was a command. Lay down your weapon. His arms felt heavy. He saw Park's eyes glaze over for a second, his rifle dipping. Then, something changed. The drones closest to them suddenly stopped. They twitched. Their smooth, coordinated movement broke. One turned in a circle. Another fired its beam harmlessly into the sky. The psychic pressure in Ji-hun's head stuttered. It was still there, but it was like a radio signal with bad interference. He didn't know why. He just saw the opening. Now, he roared, shaking off the mental fog. He stood up and fired a sustained burst at the nearest confused drone. The bullets found a seam in its armor. It sparked and collapsed. His squad, snapping back to focus, did the same. In moments, the entire group of drones was destroyed. In orbit, Vorel's sensor officer jerked upright. Archon, we are losing command links to the primary surface swarm. Signal degradation is chaotic. It is not jamming. It is a corrosive noise on the specific frequencies. What is the source? Vorel demanded, his rustling voice sharp for the first time. Unknown. No energy source detected. The interference is physical. It is coming from small objects, now dispersing through the upper atmosphere. Before Vorel could process this, a new alert flashed. A different officer spoke, confusion in its tone. Contact. A single vessel, materializing from stealth inside the orbital perimeter. It was hiding. On the main viewer, an image formed. It was a ship, but not like theirs. It was angular and solid, like a mountain of gray metal. It had no shimmering energy fields. Simply was. And it was positioned perfectly, between the Worldbreaker and 3 of its sister ships. On its hull, simple white letters read, TFN Jiangzhou. Captain Sumin's face was cool and focused on Vor-LS screen. She opened a standard comm channel, audio only. Her voice filled the bridge of the Worldbreaker, clear and utterly devoid of the fear they expected. This is Captain Sumin of the Terran Fleet Navy. You are engaged in the unlawful assault of a human colony. Cease hostilities and withdraw immediately. The demand hung in the air. It was not a plea. It was an order. For a long second, there was only silence on the Kael'var flagship. They had expected wails of surrender or cries for mercy. They had not expected this quiet, defiant voice from a ship that had appeared from nowhere. Vorel felt the first, unfamiliar prick of something cold in his gut. It was not fear. Not yet. It was the unsettling feeling of a calculation being profoundly, dangerously wrong. Silence stretched on the bridge of the Worldbreaker. The human captain's words hung in the air. Cease and withdraw. It was so absurd, so illogical, that Archon Vorel could not process it at first. A single ship, emerging from stealth, was giving an ultimatum to the entire Kael'var battle group. His large black eyes fixed on the image of the human vessel. It was blocky, utilitarian. It lacked the elegant, organic lines of his own ships. It looked like a crude tool. Anger, hot and sharp, burned away his initial surprise. This was an insult, a flaw in the perfect order of the conquest. He did not reply to the human. He spoke to his weapon officer, his voice a hiss. Target that vessel. Focus the molecular resonation beam. Reduce it to dust. On the Jiangzhou, alarms sounded, but they were soft, professional tones. Taewon's voice was tense but clear. Captain, the lead alien ship is powering a massive energy weapon. Signature is off the scale. Is targeted directly on us. Sumin did not take her eyes off the main screen. She had known they would not talk. They were conquerors. They only understood one language. Evasive pattern beta. But hold our position. Ji Wu, are the primary targets locked? Her tactical officer, Ji Wu, nodded, his hands steady on his console. Aye, Captain. The 3 secondary ships are locked. Their power distributions match our predictions. They are reliant on the flagship for targeting data. Good, Sumin said on the viewer. A terrible green light gathered at the prow of the Worldbreaker. It pulsed, growing brighter, a contained star of destructive force. The molecular resonation beam did not burn or blast. It shook the very atoms of a target apart. Against standard shields and armor, it was devastating. The beam lanced out. It was a river of emerald fire, blindingly fast. It struck the Jiangzhou amidships. On the bridge. The crew braced. There was a sound, a deep, shuddering groan of metal, like the world itself was bending. The lights flickered, but there was no explosion, no screaming tear of the hull. Report, Sumin called out. Direct hit, Taewon said, his eyes wide as he read the data. Armor sections, ablating. The outer layers are vaporizing, but the reactive matrix is doing its job. It's distributing and dissipating the resonance effect. Structural integrity is holding at 87%. The human ship had no shield to overload. Instead, its thick, multi-layered armor was designed to sacrifice itself. The outer plates vibrated themselves into dust, carrying the destructive energy away. It was a brutal, simple solution. Let the armor take the hit and break in a controlled way on the Worldbreaker. Vorel watched in disbelief. The human ship should have been an expanding cloud of particles. Instead, it was still there, scarred and glowing hot in spots, but whole. It was like watching a mountain survive a tidal wave by simply eroding a little. Before he could order a second shot, Captain Sumin gave her order. Fire primary armament. Target their logistic spines. The Jiangzhou did not fire a beam of light. From its central hull, a series of massive magnetic rails charged and released. There was no colorful energy, just a series of deep, throaty thumps that vibrated through the ship. The projectiles were not explosives. They were simple, dense rods of tungsten, taller than a man. They were fired at a fraction of light speed. They were invisible to the eye until they hit. The first rod struck the nearest Kael'var cruiser not on its weapon array or its command deck. It punched through the thinner armor of its midsection, where the sensor data suggested it stored fuel and the raw material for its drone swarms. There was a flash of light as the kinetic energy converted to heat and fury. Then a secondary, much larger explosion erupted from within the ship as its own reserves detonated. The cruiser broke in two, a silent, blooming flower of fire in the vacuum. The second and third rods found similar targets on two other ships. The results were the same: catastrophic internal chain reactions. The Kael'var ships were powerful, but they were built like intricate insects. They were not prepared for a brute force attack on their support structures that in less than 10 seconds. 3 of the 7 alien ships were turning into wreckage. Chaos erupted on the Worldbreaker.
Vorul stâlgere das alarm skræmed.
His perfect formation was shattered. The human ship hadn't tried to win a duel. It had surgically removed his ability to command the battle. The destroyed ships had been key relays for his control network. "Return fire. All batteries," he shrieked, the rustle of his voice now a screech. The remaining Kael'var ships unleashed a storm of green energy beams and plasma bolts. The space around the Jiangzhou became a hell of light. Sumin's ship began to move. It was not a graceful dance. It was a determined, heavy slog. Full military power on the thrusters. Roll ship to present fresh armor plating. Point defense web, active. Engage all incoming with kinetic interceptors. The Jiangzhou turned like a great beast. Where its armor was scarred and thin, it moved to present a fresh, thick side. From thousands of small ports, streams of high-speed metal fragments shot out, creating a swirling storm around the ship. The alien plasma bolts were torn apart by this physical wall. The energy beams struck, burning new wounds into the armor. But they could not get a sustained lock on a single point. It was a storm of noise and light battering a fortress of stone on the surface. The change was immediate. Sergeant Ji-hun saw the remaining drones in the plaza freeze completely, then drop to the ground like dead bugs. The psychic pressure vanished from his mind, leaving a strange, clear silence. He looked up. In the twilight sky, he saw bright, new stars, the explosions in orbit. In the warehouse, Governor June stared at his blank sensor screen, which had just come back online. He saw the icons for 3 alien ships go dark. He saw the identification code for the TFN Jiangzhou blinking steadily in the middle of the chaos. He did not cheer. He felt a sob of relief choke in his throat. Sumin had come, and she was fighting a war unlike any he could have imagined. On the Worldbreaker, Vorel stared at the tactical display. His clean, green icons of conquest were now red symbols of disaster. The human ship was wounded, bleeding heat and debris, but it was still fighting. It was still there. Its weapons were primitive. Its tactics were blunt. Yet they were effective in a way he had never considered. They did not fight the weapon. They fought the arm that held it. They did not defend against the spear. They broke the hand that threw it. A profound, cold understanding settled over him. They had not subjugated a precohesive species. They had stumbled upon a predator that hunted in a way they had forgotten existed. The advance of the Kael'var Imperium had not just been halted. It had run headlong into a wall. The storm of fire around the Jiangzhou stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The 3 remaining Kael'var ships, their command signals confused and their flagship reeling, broke their attack runs. They pulled back, turning their undamaged sides toward the human vessel, waiting for an order that did not come. The battle was not over, but the will to fight it had been shattered. On the bridge of the Worldbreaker, Archon Vorel stood perfectly still. The screens before him showed the broken pieces of his fleet drifting in the dark. The tactical display was a mess of failure. The human ship, labeled now as a dire threat, still hung between him and the planet. It was wounded. He could see the gashes in its armor, the venting atmosphere freezing into sparkling clouds around it. But its weapons, those terrible, simple railguns, were still oriented toward him. He knew if he fired again, those kinetic rods would find his own ship's fragile spine. The silence from the human vessel was worse than any boast. It simply waited. Vorel's mind, trained for conquest and control, scrambled for a new calculation. He could order a retreat. It was the only logical move, but the shame of it burned. Retreat from a single, primitive ship? His black eyes watched the Jiangzhou on the screen. It did not gleam. It did not shimmer with power. It was a stark, gray monument to endurance. He finally understood. This was not a battle of technology. It was a battle of philosophy, and his philosophy had lost. He let out a slow, shuddering breath. "Signal the remaining vessels," he said, his voice hollow. "Disengage. Prepare for translation out of the system. All ground forces are to be abandoned." The order went out. In the skies over New Jiangzhou, the alien ships began to glow with a different energy. A swirling, purple light that bent space around them. One by one, they vanished, leaving only scars in the starfield. On the surface, Sergeant Ji-hun saw the last of the drones power down. The strange, skittering machines became just so much dead metal in the streets. The quiet that followed was immense. It was not the quiet of peace, but the quiet after a great noise. He lowered his rifle, his arms aching. Around him, his Marines did the same, their faces smudged with dust and sweat, their eyes wide with disbelief. In the warehouse command post, Governor June listened to the reports coming in. "The attacks have stopped. The alien machines are dead. What happened in orbit?" He leaned heavily on the table, the strength leaving his body all at once. He opened a channel. "Orbital Command, this is Governor June. What is your status? Please respond." A familiar voice, strained with fatigue but steady, came back. "Governor, this is Captain Sumin. The immediate threat has withdrawn. The orbit is secure." June closed his eyes for a moment. "Sumin, your timing was acceptable." On the other end, he could almost hear the ghost of a smile. "I had some honey to deliver," her voice replied. "Is your location stable?" "We are stable. We have wounded. We have many wounded. We will send down medevac and engineering teams as soon as we can," Sumin said. "Hold on, old friend." Back on the bridge of the Jiangzhou, the immediate danger was past. But the work was just beginning. The ship was badly hurt. Alerts glowed on every console. A fire in compartment 7. A hull breach on deck 4. Life support was failing in the forward sections. Sumin stood up from her chair. Her body felt stiff. "Tae-1, damage control priorities. Get teams to the critical breaches. Hannah, plot us a stable high orbit. I don't want us drifting." The crew moved, their movements slower now, weighed down by exhaustion and the aftermath of adrenaline. They spoke in low, tired voices as they worked to save their ship. Sumin walked to the large viewport, now scarred by the heat of a near miss. Below, the planet New Jiangzhou turned, beautiful and blue. It was still there. It was still home to her people. But she felt no triumph. She felt a deep, cold weariness. Tae-1 came to stand beside her. "Initial reports are coming in from the surface. Casualties are high, but the colony's infrastructure is mostly intact. They will recover." He paused. "We stopped them, Captain. We stopped them today." Sumin corrected him softly, still looking at the planet. "They learned what we are. They learned the cost. They will be back. Or something else will be. They always come back." That was the real story, she knew. It was not a story of a great victory. It was not a story of humans being the strongest. It was a story of humans being the ones who would stand and bleed and stand again on the wall. It was a story of a long, lonely watch. Across the galaxy, in the cold archives of the Kael'var Imperium, the data from the battle was processed. The species designation was updated. Next to human, the threat classification was not given a number or a color. Instead, a new symbol was entered, created just for them. It translated roughly to contained resilience. A note was appended in the tactical database. A pre-cohesive species utilizing asymmetric warfare and profound kinetic resilience. Engages differently. Avoid unless overwhelming, non-centralized force can be applied. Cost of engagement. Catastrophic. The advance had halted. On the Jiangzhou, Repair drones buzzed around the hull like metal insects, welding plates over the wounds. Inside, medics tended to the burned and the bruised. Captain Sumin returned to her chair. She opened a small, personal locker built into its side. Inside was the jar of honey from New Jiangju, golden and smooth. She did not open it. She just looked at it for a moment, a reminder of what they had just fought for. Then she closed the locker. "Tae-1," she said, her voice returning to its usual, calm command. "Once we are stable, begin a full sensor sweep of the outer system. I want to know the moment anything larger than a dust grain moves out there." "Aye, Captain," he said. The Jiangzhou assumed its watch, a silent, steadfast sentinel against the dark. Below, the lights of the colony, though dimmer, began to flicker on again. The night would be long, and the dawn would bring hard work and mourning. But for now, there was a fragile, quiet peace. They had held the line. That was all, and that was everything. The silence after the retreat of the Kaelvar was a heavy thing. On New Jiangju, it was the silence of stunned survivors moving through broken streets. The air smelled of ozone, melted metal, and dust. People spoke in whispers, as if a loud noise might bring the nightmare back. In orbit. The silence was the hum of a wounded ship and the quiet voices of a crew tending to its hurts. The TFN Jiangzhou held its position, a guardian statue pockmarked and scarred. Captain Sumin had not slept. She moved between the bridge and the main damage control center, her face a mask of calm focus. Inside, she felt a hollow fatigue, but she could not show it. Her first officer, Tae-1, found her inspecting a patched hull breach on Deck 3. "Captain," he said, "the first shuttle from the surface is requesting docking clearance. Governor June is on board." Sumin nodded. "Grant clearance. I'll meet him in the main airlock gallery." The gallery was a wide space with a large viewing window, now spiderwebbed with cracks. Sumin stood waiting as the shuttle, a battered colonial craft, maneuvered into the docking collar. With a hiss and a series of clunks, the connection was made. The inner door opened. Governor June stepped through. He looked older. His clothes were stained, and there was a fading bruise on his temple. For a moment, the two friends just looked at each other. The formalities of rank and title fell away. Then June stepped forward and embraced her tightly. Sumin returned the hug, feeling the tension in his shoulders. "Thank you," June said, his voice thick. He pulled back, looking around the damaged gallery. "My God, Sumin, what did they do to your ship?" "What they had to," she replied simply. "Come. Let's talk in my ready room." Her ready room was small and functional. A desk, a few chairs, a display screen showing a slow rotation of the planet below. She offered him a cup of water, which he took gratefully. "The casualty reports are bad," June said, staring into the cup. "We lost over 2,000, mostly in the first hour before their drones stopped." He looked up at her. "How? How did you stop them?" "Our weapons barely scratched them." Sumin sat down. She explained it in plain terms. The central control, the Magpie drones disrupting the signal, the targeting of their support ships. She did not make it sound heroic. She made it sound like a technical problem that had been solved. June listened, slowly understanding. They were like a body with one brain. You didn't fight the fists. You cut the nerves. "Something like that," Sumin said. "And now?" June asked, the real question in his eyes. "Now we repair. We rebuild," Sumin said. "My engineering teams are already prepping to go down. We can help you get power and water systems back online." "But June," she leaned forward. "This was a probe, a single battle group. They will analyze this failure. They will come back, or others like them will. The galaxy now knows we are here, and that we can bite back." June sighed, a deep, weary sound. "I know. The Council on Earth. They will want a full report. They will probably send a permanent fleet detachment." "A fleet would be good," Sumin said, "but it will take months to arrive. Until then," she gestured to the view of the planet. "We are the fleet." They sat in silence for a moment, two people burdened with the safety of a world. Down on the surface, Sergeant Ji-hun was not celebrating. He was walking through the quiet streets of the Western District with his squad. They were looking for survivors, but mostly they were finding the dead. The alien drones lay where they had fallen, like grotesque metal sculptures. Private Park stopped beside one, poking it with his boot. It just turned off, like a light switch. "They're all connected," Ji-hun said, repeating what he had heard in the brief command update. "Cut the head off, the body dies." It made sense, but it didn't make him feel any better. The victory felt distant, abstract. The loss around him was immediate and real. He saw a young woman sitting on the steps of a shattered home, holding a child. He walked over, his team following.
Mom?
"Do you need medical help? We can take you to the emergency shelter." The woman looked up, her eyes red. She shook her head. "We're waiting for my husband. He went to check on the neighbors." Her voice was fragile, holding onto a thin thread of hope. Ji-hun nodded. He left a water bottle and a ration bar beside her. There was nothing else to do. This was the other part of the victory. The long, hard walk through the ruins. The quiet help. The waiting. Back on the Jeongjo, after June had returned to the surface, Sumin finally went to her small cabin. She sat on the edge of her bunk. The jar of honey sat on her desk. This time, she opened it. She dipped a small spoon into the golden liquid and put it in a cup of cold tea. She stirred slowly, watching it dissolve. She took a sip. The taste was sweet and rich, and it tasted of a green, peaceful place that had almost been lost. It was a taste worth fighting for. It was a taste worth standing watch for. She put the cup down and activated her personal log. The recorder light glowed softly. Personal log, Captain Sumin. The Kaelvar battle group has withdrawn. New Jeongju is secure. The Jeongjo sustained significant damage but remains operational. Casualties among the crew: 12 dead, 43 wounded. She paused, the numbers hanging in the quiet of her room. The enemy was different. They fought a war of control. We fought a war of survival. We were the harder problem today. She looked out of her small viewport at the stars, cold and countless. They will update their records. They will name us a threat, a curiosity, a contained resilience. Let them. Our duty does not change. Our watch does not end. We will repair. We will remember. And we will be here when the dark moves again. She stopped the recording. The light faded. In the silence of her cabin, with the taste of honey on her tongue and the weight of the day on her shoulders, Captain Sumin of the TFN Jeongjo finally allowed herself to close her eyes, and for a few precious minutes to rest. The ship around her hummed and held the line. The work of recovery had a rhythm, slow and steady, like a heartbeat returning to normal after a great shock. Aboard the Jeongjo, the rhythm was the sound of welding torches and the clang of new armor plate being fitted. In the streets of New Jeongju, it was the sound of debris being cleared and the quiet murmur of people helping their neighbors. 2 weeks had passed. The Jeongjo, while still bearing its scars, was now functional and strong. Its orbit was a constant, comforting fixture in the sky, a reminder that the watch was still being kept. Captain Sumin stood on the bridge, feeling the subtle, familiar vibrations of her ship restored to health. The main viewer showed a live feed from the surface. Governor June was overseeing the reopening of the central hydroponic farm, the source of the colony's food. Green shoots were already visible under the repaired domes. A supply convoy from the Mars sector has translated at the system's edge, Tae-1 reported from his station. 2 freighters and a light escort. ETA 48 hours. They bring relief supplies and the first wave of Terran fleet engineers. Sumin nodded. It was good news. It meant the wider human community had heard, and help was coming. But it also meant a change. Her solitary watch was ending. Soon, others would take up the guard. She felt a mix of relief and a strange, protective reluctance. Captain, the communications officer, a young man named Jean, spoke up. His voice held a note of confusion. "We are receiving a tight beam transmission. It's on a Kaelvar frequency, but it's a clean signal. No saiki carrier wave. Just audio, translated into basic. A quiet tension settled over the bridge. Every crew member turned to their captain. Sumin's expression did not change. Put it through. Main speaker only. There was a brief crackle of static, then a voice filled the bridge. It was different from the rustling command of Archon Vorel. This voice was lower, flatter, devoid of the oppressive weight of the earlier transmissions. It was the voice of a technician, not a conqueror. Vessel designated TFN Jiangzhou. This is a research adjunct of the Kael'var Imperium. We are not a military wing. We request a parley. A single, unarmed shuttle wishes to approach under truce. We wish to understand. Tae-won looked at Sumin, his eyebrows raised. It could be a trick. It could. Sumin agreed quietly. She thought for a moment. The Kael'var had shown no interest in talk before. Only domination. A request to understand was, in its own way, more unsettling than a threat. It was an admission that their previous understanding was wrong. Jean, she said, reply on the same frequency. Tell them they may send one shuttle. It will be met and escorted by our craft. No weapons are to be powered. Any deviation will be met with immediate destruction. The message was sent. The reply came swiftly. Terms are accepted. An hour later, a small, sleek Kael'var shuttle, unlike the aggressive drop pods, drifted from the edge of the system. It was met by two of the Jiangzhou's own shuttles, armed and wary. They guided it into the main hangar bay, where a full squad of Marines in heavy armor waited, weapons ready. Sergeant Ji-hun stood at their front at Sumin, observed from the hangar control room above. She did not go down. Not yet. The alien shuttle landed with a soft hiss. The hatch opened. No ramp extended. A figure simply floated down, its legs moving in a gentle, stepping motion as if descending invisible stairs. It was a Kael'var, clad in a simple, gray robe rather than armor. Its large black eyes scanned the hangar, taking in the Marines, the human technology, the sheer, solid reality of the ship around it. It showed no fear, only a deep, intense curiosity. It stopped a safe distance from Ji-hun. It spoke, a translator device around its neck producing the same flat, technical voice they had heard. I am Adjunct Kael. I have come to learn. Ji-hun kept his rifle lowered but ready. Learn what? The Imperium's assessment was flawed, Adjunct Kael stated, as simply as reporting the weather. You were classified as precohesive, a simple collective. You are not. Your victory was not an accident. It was a result of a different cohesion. One we do not have a model for. My function is to build models. To do that, I must observe. From above, Sumin listened. This was not an apology. It was not surrender. It was scientific inquiry from a race that viewed the universe as a series of problems to be solved. They had solved the problem of conquest over many species. Humanity was a problem they had failed to solve. Now they wanted data. She made a decision. She keyed the hangar intercom. Sergeant, stand down your squad to a watchful posture. Adjunct Kael, you may have your observer. You will be escorted at all times. You will be shown what we choose to show you. Do you agree? The adjunct looked up toward the source of the voice. I agree. Over the next few days, Adjunct Kael was shown carefully selected things. It was allowed to see the repair crews working on the Jiangzhou's hull, noting how humans patched and adapted rather than replaced whole systems. It was shown the colony's recovery efforts, observing how individuals formed impromptu teams without central command. It was given a basic, unclassified overview of human history, not just the wars, but the rebuildings that always followed. It asked questions. Your units acted independently when command links failed. How is cohesion maintained without a central pulse? Ji-hun, who was often part of the escort, tried to explain. We train. We trust each other. We have a plan, and if the plan falls apart, we use our heads. The adjunct recorded this, but its expression was one of polite confusion. Trust was not a variable in its equations. Finally, Sumin agreed to meet it face-to-face in a neutral briefing room. Adjunct Kael stood on one side of a table. Sumin stood on the other. You fight the war before the war, the adjunct said, its head tilted. Your ship was built not just to win a battle, but to survive losing one. Your society is built not just to function, but to persist after failure. This is a redundancy we do not possess. We optimize for efficiency. You optimize for endurance. We have a long history, Sumin said. It has taught us that walls fall, so we learn how to rebuild them. The adjunct was silent for a long moment. This is the data point we lacked. Your strength is not in your peak output. It is in your baseline. Your minimum viable function is remarkably high. You are not a sharp, breakable tool. You are a blunt, durable one. It paused, its large eyes blinking slowly. This will be reported. The classification contained resilience will be updated. A recommendation of permanent quarantine may be advised. Sumin felt no anger. This was simply their logic. A quarantine is a kind of peace, she said. We can live with that. Adjunct Kale gave a slight, stiff bow, a gesture it had clearly learned from observing them. Then our function here is complete. We will depart. You have my thanks. For the data. The adjunct was escorted back to its shuttle. It left as quietly as it had come. Later, on the bridge, Tae-Won looked troubled.
Permanent quarantine?
They're just going to leave us alone? It seems too easy. Sumin watched the Kaelvar shuttle vanish into the dark. It's not a gift, Tae-Won. It's a conclusion. They see us now not as a prize to be taken, but as a puzzle that is too costly to solve. We are not a threat to be crushed. We are a condition to be managed. A stone in their path they will simply walk around. She turned from the viewer. The galaxy was vast, and humanity was now a known quantity within it. Not the strongest, not the most advanced, but the ones who could take a hit and keep standing. The ones whose baseline was survival. The rhythm of recovery continued. The Jeongjo held its orbit. The lights of New Jeongju grew brighter each night. The watch went on, not with the blazing guns of battle, but with the steady, patient eyes of those who knew the value of what they guarded, and the long, quiet cost of keeping it safe.